Got it. Yes, indeed.
Ready to go.
Okay, let me call us to order for today's Science Subcommittee meeting. Okay, that's lovely. Let me call us to order and then ask Maria Bonneville to call the roll.
Haifa Abdullah, Deborah Deese,
Here.
Mark Fisher Colbury,
Here.
Elena Flowers, Judy Gasson,
Here.
Larry Goldstein,
Yeah, here.
David Higgins, Pat Levitt,
Here.
Dave Martin, Shlomo Melmed,
Here.
Christine Miskowski,
Here.
Jonathan Thomas,
Here.
Art Torres,
Here.
Carl Ware,
Here.
Carol Watson, Keith Yamamoto.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We have a number of concept plans and amendments to consider today. And first one is for Disc 0. Who is doing the presentation, please?
I will be doing the presentation, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Well, Mr. Chairman, no, Chair of the subcommittee.
Whatever.
Great.
Go ahead, Rosa.
Larry. Great. So let me just go and share my screen. Can you see my slides?
Yes.
Yeah. Great.
Fantastic. So, dear Mr. Chairman, members of the Science Subcommittee, on behalf of our team at CIRM, I am presenting this concept that we will be bringing to the board for approval this month. This is a concept that is part of the Discovery Pillar of programs. So, as we all know, our mission is to accelerate world-class science to deliver transformative regenerative medicine treatments in an equitable manner to a diverse California and the world. And as we know, despite the progress in regenerative medicine over the past decade, there are still critical gaps in our understanding of fundamental human cell biology and disease that affect the pace of scientific discovery and prevent the potential of this research from being fully realized as the basis for new therapies and as tools for biomedical innovation. The new era of technological innovation in gene editing, single cell profiling, data science, and also engineering is presenting to us with new opportunities for addressing questions of biology that have remained elusive. And all this work has led to the new strategic plan and a new and revised mission statement reflecting the new era that we are in. CIRM seeks to harness all of these and other synergies through this new Zero Foundation Awards mechanism that would be fostering a robust discovery engine that will not only open new doors to treatments, but also accelerate and increase the likelihood of bringing regenerative medicine treatments to patients in need. And by incorporating principles and practices of diversity, equity, and inclusion within the science, this program also strives to foster discoveries that will equitably impact patients in all our communities. CIRM has established, as we know, a strong track record for strategic investments in these 5 pillars: the infrastructure, education, discovery, translation, and clinical. And through CIRM's new strategic plan, we will enhance, organize, and interconnect CIRM's proven funding model to achieve the overarching goals. Today's concept, as I mentioned earlier on, is presented in the context of the middle pillar, which is the discovery pillar. As a bit of background, and we heard this during the workshop that we had a couple of weeks ago, well, a week and a little bit more ago. We've received a lot of feedback from, and we've been informed by multiple layers of stakeholders over the past couple of years that this zero concept has also been informed by these stakeholder discussions and input that started even prior to Prop 14. And one of these stakeholder meetings was the Brainstorming Neurodegeneration workshop that happened in 2019. and also the Strategic Scientific Advisory Panel in 2021. And actually, we have an overview of what the outcomes of these meetings happen in one of our blog posts authored by our colleague Mitra Hushman. Through all these meetings, CIRM received broad stakeholder input about the need for continued research of basic mechanisms of stem cell biology, gene therapy approaches, and disease biology to improve the likelihood of clinical success for regenerative medicines. This has translated into the strategic plan that I mentioned. And to realize the full potential of regenerative medicine for society, CIRM is committed to promoting success of high-risk, high-reward projects. And for that, we are proposing these new objectives for the Discovery Foundation Awards. And the objective of the Discovery Foundation Awards is to support rigorous studies addressing critical basic knowledge gaps in the biology of stem cells and regenerative medicine approaches, and to advance stem cell-based tools. Projects funded through the Foundation Awards should propose impactful or innovative research that culminates in a discovery or technology that could either advance our understanding of the biology of a stem cell biology that's relevant to human biology and disease, or advance the development or use of human stem cells as tools for biomedical innovation, or lead to a greater applicability of regenerative medicine discoveries to communities representing the full spectrum of diversity, or advance the application of genetic research that is relevant to human biology and disease as it pertains to stem cells and regenerative medicine. And I will go into this a little bit more in depth in the next slide. In terms of eligibility for the project, these 0 eligible projects will define and propose research that addresses a key knowledge gap in our understanding of the biology or application of stem cells or progenitor cells, or in the application of genetic research as it pertains to stem cells or regenerative medicine, as I was saying in the earlier slide. For the scope of this solicitation, CIRM considers genetic research to mean research that alters genomic sequences of cells, either by editing, removing, or adding DNA sequences, or introduces or directly manipulates nucleic acids, such as mRNAs or ASOs in cells. While we do not include research on animals, while we do include research on animals and animal cells, we require that discoveries made in non-human cells be validated with a relevant human cell equivalent as part of the proposed projects. In terms of institutional eligibility, all California for-profits and non-profits are eligible to apply, and PI eligibility, the principal investigators must commit at least 20% of their effort. Now, data sharing and management plan. Consistent with the strategic plan to leverage collective knowledge to inspire collaborative research that addresses Californians' unmet medical needs, if the board approves this concept, we are planning to incorporate in the application some guidelines for the development and execution of a data sharing and management plan, effectually capturing scientific knowledge and enabling collaborative research. These guidelines and templates are there to support applicants in the development of successful research projects and maximize the collaborative potential of CIRM-funded research. We're also going to provide guidelines for allocation of funds for personnel and/or activities related to managing and sharing the data. And for the data sharing and management plan, applicants will also be required to adhere to the fair data sharing principles of findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable data for scientific research and therapeutic development. In terms of budget, CIRM will fund direct project costs of up to $1 million per award for up through 3 years duration. And of note, we have chosen to provide the direct cost in this slide, but for the indirect cost, which is highlighted in the bottom there, the cost per project, as you know, varies per institution. for indirects, but the average is about $1.5 million for 3 years per institution. Taking this into account, and if the opportunity is available 1 to 2 times a year, we estimate, based on the previous basic DISC pillar programs and other information that we benchmark to, that we estimate an approximate of 12 to 14 awards with an estimate of $20 million per round. And this will be the request that we will bring to the board on the 24th of March, and we will be requesting this project for concept for approval. And with this, I'm done with my presentation, and I will welcome any questions that you might have.
Excellent.
You're muted.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I discovered that. So thank you. Excellent presentation. Let's have question or discussion from the members of the subcommittee, please.
I'd like to raise a question about the percent effort. Are we going to be excluding mid-career and senior investigators based on a 20% commitment of time?
If they are, if they cannot commit that percentage of time, then we could be excluding them. Yes. I mean, it's not about which stage in their career they are. It's about whether they can commit the appropriate time that we are requiring for these type of projects.
Well, I'm just thinking that in terms of many of our most successful midterm and senior investigators, you know, the typical NIH grant has them on at 5% because they're committed to 3 or 4 other grants and maybe other opportunities.
They could come in as another member of the team instead of being the PI and leave the PI to someone more junior that might have a chance to come in and lead the project. We also want to incentivize younger investigators to get into leading positions.
Certainly.
Is it acceptable to have multiple PIs, and therefore, if you have, let's say, 2 MPIs, each one at 10%, that's a total of 20%?
Interesting question.
Yes, that's I cannot recall. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, if they're MPIs, then what's required, certainly at NIH, was required is an MPI plan. Who's responsible for what, how any disagreements would be, you know, managed, et cetera. So there's a separate plan for MPIs, but they're becoming more and more popular. Just like, you know, sharing a first authorship, right? That preceded this, but it's becoming more popular, and also has a possibility of providing a tethered way of professional development for junior and senior investigators.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I've seen in some other agencies, they are incentivizing these multi-disciplinary type of teams with somebody that might be a more junior PI, but then needs to have another co-PI that is more senior, that could be at a lesser percentage. Those are some things, and I think our president, Maria Millan, has her hand raised. Maria.
I actually was going to ask if Gil Zambrano and Jen Lewis can speak to what our current policy is, because if this is something to consider, it would require, you know, a change or an amendment to our policy. Gil?
Yeah, I'm happy to speak to that. So currently, the way our grants administration policy is structured, we only allow for 1 PI. And part of it is because we define the PI to be the single person who is responsible for the conduct of the award under those policies. And so the percent effort is tied to that one individual. That doesn't, of course, prevent others from participating and sharing in and contributing to the project in some way. But the 20% is pretty much fixed on a single person at this time.
Thank you, Gil.
Yeah, so I mean, so I understand that it would have to be considered as a change of policy, but given the multidisciplinary nature of all these projects, they're all multidisciplinary now, and the opportunity to be more inclusive, it's something to consider. And then there could still be a rule about if it's a single PI, it's 20% effort. If it's MPI, it's equivalent. That's what NIH expects, equivalent efforts between the MPIs, because you can't have one at 15 and one at 5. That's not an MPI situation. That's a single PI and a co-investigator. But you could require it to be up, adding to 20%. The other thing that's done is there's one of the two is designated as the corresponding PI, and that's who the business is done with, and is ultimately responsible for the financial and administrative oversight. Anyway.
My question, yeah, thank you, Pat. My question to Gil and Jen could be, could we need to amend the GAP to allow for this?
No, I mean, well, in order to allow multiple PIs, you would. I think the question is, do you want to adjust the percent effort for the way we currently define the PI, which is perhaps akin to what is the administrative PI that we hold accountable for all the award and communication. So as mentioned, if you lower, for example, the percent effort to 10%, you can bring others on board to be sort of a pseudo co-PI. We don't necessarily have a specific definition for one, but others that can contribute and collaborate in a similar way.
But couldn't we get into the potential issue of having then people that are not committed, they are senior and not committed to the extent that we need for the project, and then we kind of dilute the effort in terms of leadership on a project of importance? Couldn't this be a problem?
I don't think it's a problem, because in the budget justification, I assume that, in personnel, that you have to describe what each key personnel is responsible for on the project. And if it's unsatisfactory, I mean, if it's things like, one will be the oversight person, the other will do all of the research. I mean, I haven't seen that as a problem. I just, I don't want to lengthen this or confuse it. Maybe we can take it up some other time. But I do think that it's becoming more and more common because a single PI does not have the ability to really oversee an entirety of these multidisciplinary projects. So you can call them a co-PI, I suppose, but that diminishes their title or role that they're really playing in the project. And it again, I think it creates an opportunity to be more inclusive of developing interdisciplinary partnerships. But
okay.
Okay.
Yeah, Maria.
We have two hands. Yeah, Maria, go.
Oh, if the board, after this discussion, wishes us to go back and propose how this could be done, that's certainly something we can do. And I think Gil gave a good example of how that could be done in our current policies. Dr. Miaskowski, I didn't mean to raise my hand at the same time.
No, that's okay. I'd like to speak in support of Pat's idea. I've been involved not in, obviously, stem cell biology projects, but in other projects with multiple PIs. And as Pat said, there is a contact PI that is the administrative person. But the multiple PI plan, I think, might address Rosa's concern, where people actually spell out the rationale for needing two PIs, and then the responsibilities of each of those PIs is listed. And then the review committee can adjudicate whether or not the percent effort that's applied to those multiple PIs is accurate to get the work done. And in my experience doing this, it really, really enriches the project, because you bring people with two often diverse backgrounds that are going to be greater, synergistically in terms of the sum of the parts. And it really, really works quite well. So I would support what Pat's saying.
Larry, you're on mute. Still on mute.
That should have unmuted it. Well, okay, it's not behaving. I was just going to mention that CIRM has had these large percent effort requirements for a number of years. So, I think in one sense, it's been working okay. There hasn't been a push to make a big change until this conversation, I think. On the other hand, I could see the value of doing some sort of experiment on our user community to say, try it out on a pilot basis, see whether we get things that are sensible and that reviewers agree are sensible plans that that provide maximal engagement and commitment from the PIs of the project. That's what I think we're worried about. We don't want a situation where somebody slides in under the limit and isn't really very committed. So I guess the question I would have for Rosa and the team is, how hard would it be to engineer a single cycle of applications where we tried this out and got a sense of, is there a lot of demand for it? And then what sorts of arrangements do we see?
I don't think it could be very hard. I think, I don't think it could be very hard. I think we've heard enough examples and feedback during this call that we can actually develop the application and the review criteria with our review office that will enable to engineer a pilot cycle that could implement these changes. I think it could be interesting to see the outcomes, and it could be very informative for us. Maria, do you agree as well?
I think that, just by nature, if we gave a choice, it would just get piloted because you'd see what the utilization is and you'd see how they'd fare in the review process. And then if it doesn't work out well, it just defaults to our original. So I agree. And I would defer to Gil, who's going to be in charge of making this happen. So, and then of course, it sounds like it's compatible with a gap, but I'd love to hear if Jen Lewis, has any other, thoughts on that. Gil?
Sorry, did you want to go to Jen or to me?
Just wanted to get your take as to whether, in some format, this could be something made available in one way or the other, either through a pilot or, giving the applicants a choice to choose to take the 20% on their own or take another format that, we could TBD what that looks like. We'll bring it back, to the board once that's settled. But does that seem like it's a feasible approach?
I think we need to look at it carefully because I'm actually not sure what implications we have in the grants administration policy for a PI, because we define pretty specifically what a PI is, and it currently does not allow splitting that responsibility out. So it may require potentially a modification of the gap. So I would need to look into it to see how doable it is.
Jennifer Lewis, Maria thought you might know off the top of your head the answer to Gil's question.
Yeah, just from, I need to look a little closer from just reviewing the gap. I think we have flexibility in providing the option in the program announcement to test it out. I do think we might want to just after this meeting, we can go back and look at the language and have the legal team weigh in on whether that's, but from my view right now, I think we have flexibility to put it in the program announcement.
Okay, so I think what we will do is we will come back to the board with like the whether there is a flexibility in providing this in the program announcement from corroborated from the legal perspective. We'll look at this and get back by email. No, we can do that. Okay.
Yeah, that sounds reasonable to me. So the proposal would be the grants administration team will have a look at the language, see whether this is something we could offer as an experiment in this round. And when we vote on this particular concept plan, which I think we need to do,
Yes.
We'll do it with the proviso that there is this possibility that there would be, sort of a last minute alteration to offer a pilot program for multiple PIs, adding up to 20%. Have I captured the essence of this?
Excellent. Yes, you did.
Okay, good.
Larry, I'll just note that if we can get that settled before we go to the board in March, because remember this will move to the board in March, and then we can make the final vote for it at the March board meeting.
Yeah. Sound feasible, guys? Gil, Jennifer, Maria?
Yes, from my end.
Okay. Any that's interesting. Any other discussion items? I want to just add something in a request. Is it, I looked at the data sharing plan, and as you know, I've had an interest in this particular issue. I wonder if it's possible to offer links to our grantee community to the NIH policies that give some examples of how they might carry these things out. I do worry that it's a little too open-ended, and it would be helpful if we gave some additional advice to our applicants.
Yes, and I had a couple of slides to provide a little bit more detail about the type of data elements that we were considering, and it's all being aligned with the NIH new policies that are coming into effect in 2023 and that have been under discussion and review for the last 3 years, I think. So we've been carefully looking at these and evaluating them, and that's what we would be basing. So we could, one conundrum here would be if we link to their whole policies, it could be confusing because they are, NIH is very different institutes, and we have a bit more homogeneity in what we can offer to our grantees. So could we want to perhaps provide a PDF that outlines what we are thinking about instead of linking to them? I'm just suggesting. And we have Maria and David Higgins. I don't know who was first. Maria, I think, was first.
I'll let the chair, choose.
Oh.
Okay.
Dr. Goldstein, please. I wanted to suggest something after Dr. Higgins speaks in terms of that specific question, and we can either do it now or at the time that Gil presents the concept changes, because there is the data sharing is something that's being proposed across the programs. But I'll just yield to Dr. Higgins first, and then that's on the table. We do have some supplemental information to just illustrate how this could be, implemented.
Good. David, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, President Milan. I just wanted to chime in and second or back up what Larry was just saying about us sort of giving people some information about how they could most successfully craft their application. I just wanted to share with you that my general knowledge of CIRM prior to even being involved with CIRM was that they were an institution that their goal wasn't to trick you and make you fail. The goal was to find out what CIRM could do to make you succeed, to get money. And I think that philosophy is very unusual, very unique, and extremely powerful. And I think that's what Larry is basically saying, not to put words in your mouth. And I just wanted to second that I think that's really, really what sets us apart from other places that grant money.
Great. Thank you, Dave.
We have a general scheme that we can share at any time, Dr. Goldstein, whenever you think it's appropriate.
So it would apply to DISC 0 as well as 2 and the TRAN and Lin 1 and 2, because they're listed separately in the agenda.
If it's relevant to the the subcommittee, deliberations on the DISC 0, this could be a fine time for our team to present this so that you can, kind of look at DISC 0 holistically. It's also relevant to the concept changes. So Rosa has some supplementary discussion slides that could help in that if that's what you would like to do.
Thank you. That sounds like a great idea to me, Maria. Thank you very much. Rosa, okay.
Rosa, you're on mute.
I'm trying to learn from Larry, from Dr. Goldstein. Okay. So this is the phased approach implementation of data sharing. And as you know, CIRM has in recent years already incorporated data management plans in our grant proposals. This was first implemented during the emergency COVID program and has highlighted the importance of collaborative research and data sharing, which was very critical at the time. Since then, one of the things that we have realized is that there is variability in the plans that are coming in. And that made us realize that we need to be more clear in the guidelines and templates that we provide to be able to help our grantees better to be successful. So with the board's approval, if we approve this, we could be implementing a second phase designed to solve these issues by providing guidelines for data management and sharing. So CIRM would be providing in the RFA clear instructions to researchers to provide a plan for how scientific data will be preserved and shared in accord with the FAIR principles. And we would also, as I mentioned earlier on, allocate funds in their proposed budget for personnel and all activities related to managing and sharing of this data. And I'll provide a little bit more detail in the next slide. On applications, then through the program announcement, we would have an application that would provide two types of templates. The one would be for the data management and sharing plan, and then one for allowable cost. We could also be providing a list of established and available data repositories, focusing on research omics data sets, and also a list of training and tutorials, links to different tutorials and training that have been made available through the federal government and other institutions that could be helpful for when using these repositories of data. Through the grants working group review, there could be clearly defined criteria for review of the strength of the data management plan. And in terms of accountability, the incorporation of the data sharing and management plan could be into the award milestones. Phase 2 could then start. We don't know the timing for this is TBD, of course, very dependent on the discussions and feedback from the board, but we coordinate and shape by CIRM future data and consortia programs. In this next slide, we have basically some examples of what we could be asking in a plan. Many of these things will be incorporated and have funding through the award that basically, and to enable these and the personnel that would be responsible to ensure adherence to these requirements, some would be providing funds through the award. So the proposed elements, the data type and standards, that could be describing the scientific data to be managed and preserved and shared together, with an indication of what type of standards will be applied to the scientific data and its associated metadata, for example. In terms of related tools, we could be asking to provide an indication of whether specialized tools could be needed to access or manipulate shared scientific data to support the replication or the reuse. And we would be asking, if appropriate, to name if they needed tools and software, which ones would be. In terms of data preservation, access and timelines for access, this could include plans and timelines for data preservation and access, including the name of the repository and repositories where scientific data and metadata arising from the project could be archived. And in this context, CIRM could be providing supplementary information to assist in selecting suitable repositories for scientific data resulting from the funded research. My colleague Shyam Patel has some supplementary information with regards to this in terms of what we could be providing and what has already been done through CIRM, what some of our grantees have been using in terms of repositories. In terms of reuse distribution of data considerations, a description, we could be asking for a description of any applicable factors that could affect subsequent access, distribution, or reuse of scientific data related, for example, to informed consent or privacy and confidentiality protections, or whether access to the scientific data derived from humans could be controlled, and any other restrictions of consideration. And then in terms of governance and data sharing management, we would be asking to indicate how compliance with the plan could be monitored and managed, and the oversight, etc. And as I mentioned again, to enable these, the personnel that would be responsible for ensuring the adherence to all these requirements, CIRM could be providing funds through the award. I hope this is helpful.
Yeah, I think that's great, Rosa. I think it's a terrific step ahead. I think it'll help our grantees and applicants with managing this. Obviously, some types of data are going to be much more straightforward than others. Omics data we already know how to do. You know, immunofluorescence microscopy experiments, it's not completely obvious to me that we yet know exactly how to handle those data, but maybe we'll learn. I wonder if I could ask Keith, if he's still on the line, who's very in touch with the NIH. Is there anything that's been learned at the NIH about how to manage these sorts of plans, or have there been any terrible mistakes we should know about?
I don't think so. The plan is really set to be implemented in 2023. And so we've all seen the proposals that have been put forward. The data sharing on the clinical trial side remains, in my view, hopelessly weak. As actually launched in the first data sharing plan put forward in 2003 from NIH. There was an advisory that clinical trial data, proposals for clinical trials from NIH must be accompanied by a data sharing plan, but not any requirement for data sharing. And that language has persisted since 2003 through 8 versions until what is now called the final plan. And so I don't know how much we're going to learn from there, but the overall data sharing scheme will be implemented in 23, and we'll begin to see, and I think that only then will we really be able to see whether there are some flaws that need to be addressed.
Great, thank you, Keith. Rosa and team, we do intend our plan to apply to clinical trial data ultimately, don't we?
Yes, we could. Yes, and this data sharing plan, and I should actually defer to my colleague, Dr. Creasy. Perhaps you may want to habla. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you, Rosa. Thank you, Larry. So we're still thinking about a data sharing plan for clinical, but we know, for example, our sickle cell grants that are working closely with the NIH and HLBI, their data are likely to go into Biodata Catalyst, which is, again, an important database for NIH. And so, but we're still, again, thinking about, is this like one repository, and maybe there are others? So it's still being studied.
Okay, thank you. Pat Levitt, do you have a question or comment?
Yeah, I was just going to comment that, so the omics data are obviously the most relevant and easiest to comply with, and it's been relatively successful. I can tell you just from my own experience, other kinds of data, like through ENDAR, for example, which is the Autism National Database, has been extremely difficult. I was just going to mention, and I don't know what the word tools meant, but I think in addition to sharing data, sharing protocols and analytical pipelines, I think really needs to be included. And there are very straightforward mechanisms that people generally use, but not everybody posts their analytical pipeline on GitHub, for example, which is a free open access database. And I think through these studies, there will definitely be analytical pipelines and other sorts of protocols that will be developed and should be shared openly.
Great.
That's a great, yeah. It's a, oh, sorry. Can I say something?
Go ahead, Rosa, please.
Oh.
Yeah.
No, this is great. And I don't know if Dr. Levitt had the chance to attend the workshop last Friday for the data infrastructure. And we were talking about the concept of the data biosphere, which could contain analytical pipelines. And this would be something that we would definitely be thinking about in phase 2 of this implementation. That's an excellent point. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Great. Yeah. Any other questions or discussion here? Maria, do we have a quorum so we can vote?
We do have a quorum.
All right.
So we need a motion.
We need a motion. Yes. No, somebody.
So moved.
Second somewhere.
Second,
Okay, great. Let's see, any further discussion before we call the roll?
I'm sorry, who was the second? I was just trying to find the voice, but I didn't know who was the second.
Pat, it was Pat.
Oh, thank you, Pat. Great.
Good, great. Okay, Maria Bonneville. It's in your court.
Can you call for public comment and then we will.
Oh, we need public comment on this item
Yes.
specifically. Okay, yeah, yes, public comment, please. Do we have any?
We do not have any.
Okay.
You know, we follow these rules.
Whoops, Kevin Marks has something to say all of a sudden. Kevin.
All of a sudden. So we've been working a little bit on the background with respect to the issue of the co-PI definition and the allowance under the gap. In a quick review, our gap does not envision the use of a co-PI in any of the activities, but we're in the midst of actually reviewing our gap and proposing certain revisions. So we can always take that into consideration as we, if this committee and the board wishes to do so, we can take that into consideration as we propose additional modifications.
So I think the implication of what you just said is we can't by fiat have a pilot program on this particular concept that we're discussing, and that any change in the gap would have to come through here and then go to the full board before it was implemented. Is that right?
In a quick review of the gap, yes. We can explore a little bit more with relation to our flexibility, but as I stated, the current wording of the gap does not allow a co-PI type situation.
Okay, so I guess we can't do a pilot program on this one, so strike that from the plan. But it sounds like we should ask Kevin and team to research making changes in the gap to allow such a pilot program and then bring it back to this group, I guess, and then to the full board, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Anything else before we vote? Okay, Maria Bonneville. Now you can call the roll.
Haifa Abdul Haq, Deborah Deese,
Yes.
Mark Fisher Colbury,
Yes.
Elena Flowers, Judy Gasson,
Yes.
Larry Goldstein,
Yes.
David Higgins,
Yes.
Pat Levitt,
Yes.
Dave Martin, Shlomo Melmed,
Yes.
Christine Miskowski,
Yes.
Jonathan Thomas,
Yes.
Art Torres,
Aye.
Carl Ware,
Yes.
Carol Watson, Keith Yamamoto.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, thank you, everybody. On to item 4 in the agenda. Additional amendments to concept plans for discovery, translation, and clinical stage projects. Let's try to remember the discussions we just had so we don't have to reinvent the wheel when we talk about these other proposed modifications. So who's got this?
I got this one. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to share my screen. And here we go. All right. So as you know, we have ongoing opportunities to fund discovery, translational, and clinical stage programs that have been running now since about 2015. And so we periodically come to you with some tweaks or changes for these concepts. And so we are coming to you again with some proposed changes, which I will go over. So I divided this up to kind of focus in on changes to specific concepts. And then at the end, I'm going to talk about some of the global ones that apply to all of these concepts. And we provided the document. So you will see the actual concept document with tracked changes where you can see how those are being implemented. These are kind of, the slides are going to just present a high level overview of these. So for the Discovery 2 concept, this DISC 2 is our Quest program, which seeks to support work to identify a product candidate of some kind. In many cases, or probably in most cases, a therapeutic of some sort, but in other cases, it may be a tool. So one of the proposals that we have in this concept is to increase the duration allowable for therapeutic candidate awards from 2 years to 3 years. And this is based in part on feedback and just our observation of applicants and awardees in getting to that end goal of identifying a therapeutic candidate, and feeling that by allowing more time, we are likely to increase the success of them accomplishing that goal. So that is one of the proposals, and aligned with that is an increase in the budget to account for the increase in time from 24 to 36 months, but also to allow a small increase in adjustment to total project costs that account for increases in caps to personnel, as well as just the adjustment of goods and services and inflation overall. One of the additional elements to this is the opportunity to add 200 or up to 200,000 in over that cap that applicants may request with justification for specific activities. And these specific activities are obtaining and or sharing development compatible lines, testing multiple lines to ensure quality of their selected development candidate, and to address scientific diversity. So an example that has come up often, particularly since our COVID initiatives, was increasing the number of lines that are tested to ensure that there is racial and ethnic diversity represented in those lines that are tested. And so by providing this allowance, hopefully it may incentivize greater study of those diverse lines, as well as the opportunity to make that a reality for those. So that's just the DISC 2. We have one change that applies across DISC 2 and then our translational concept, which is to increase the allowance to award launch from 60 days currently to 90 days. We've been going back and forth a little bit. We tried to be very progressive in this, and we went down to as little as 30 days when we launched the COVID program. I think there was really an effort to try to speed up what we do as much as we could, but that was not sustainable beyond that. And we've found that about 90 days is a more comfortable window that allows us to work with the applicants or awardees to be in order to negotiate the final contract and launch those awards. So that applies to those two. For the clinical program, so the CLIN 2 is the concept and opportunity that funds clinical trial projects. And so the main change here is a proposal to change the basis for the determining what the award maximum and co-funding amounts would be. So currently, the way we do this is based on whether a project is a phase 1, phase 2, or phase 3 clinical trial. We've found over time that not all projects fit very neatly within the 1, 2, or 3 phase designation. Sometimes there's 1, 2s or projects that maybe should be labeled a 1 but are not, or a 2, and vice versa. And also there is the, I think, the desire from some applicants to try to label and fit their project where they can to account for the award maximum that they can claim or for the co-funding allowance. So we thought we would simplify it a bit, and instead of using the phase 1, 2, and 3, propose that studies that are first in human, that are testing a therapeutic candidate in a given disease indication with a given route of administration would then have an award max of 12 million for nonprofit, 8 million for for-profit, co-funding none for nonprofit, and 30% for for-profit. And those are identical to what we currently have for our phase 1 studies. So that aligns pretty well, but we're just now calling it first in human. All succeeding studies, so anything after first in human, would then enter into that second tier where they can request up to 15 million, whether nonprofit or for-profit, and would require a co-funding of 40%, again, whether for-profit or nonprofit. And this is aligned with what we currently have for phase 2 studies coming in. All right, so that's the proposal for CLIN 2. For CLIN 1, this is just a very simple change, actually, of including language for those that are proposing allogeneic cell therapies. This is just ensuring that they meet the donor eligibility requirements, which we already have in the discovery and TRAN concepts. And so we're just bringing it into CLIN 1 just to make sure that that is consistent. And in terms of global changes that apply to all 3, discovery, TRAN, and CLIN, we talked about the data sharing plan requirements. So here again, just to emphasize what we're doing is simply making a change in the language. We actually have already had language in these concepts that began around the time that we instituted the COVID opportunities for having a data sharing plan. And so we have since that time gotten to see a little bit about what folks do with a plan. Some are not so great, some are great. So we're hoping to tweak the language a little bit and say that now, instead of just expecting that we require awardees to develop and execute a data sharing plan, we also require that they share in accordance to FAIR data principles, as well as also to allocate funds in the proposed budget to allow for either personnel and or activities that relate to the data sharing. Let's see, we are updating DEI language. These are not significant updates in the language because that also has existed in all of these concepts for a while, but we're trying to reflect some of the improvements that we continue to make. We're consolidating our DEI sections to make it clearer for applicants and for us to provide better instruction, as well as to reflect board feedback that we've received in this arena. We are also just broadly removing expired references to the CIRM 2.0, streamlining the document. And so you may have noticed that the templates upon which we have them are all different and new, but they're all consistent with one another. And hopefully this will help present the information in a clearer fashion for everyone to see. And so speaking of consistency, one of the other examples in which we are tweaking language to ensure that this is the case is in the eligibility of the candidates that can come in for each of these opportunities. One of the examples that we're aligning is in the first bullet, where in the translation program, for a few historical reasons, we were not allowing minimally manipulated bone marrow, cord blood, or unmodified HS seeds in that particular opportunity, but it was being allowed in discovery and clinical. So just to make it consistent, we're going to allow it in TRAN so that they are all basically the same. And there will be less confusion, I think, among applicants of what qualifies or what does not. And then I think with that, so that kind of takes care of the proposed changes, but we also do have a question that may go into a little bit of discussion of whether, now that we have moved forward with a discovery 0 concept that has a genetic research definition, which is a little bit different than the gene therapy definition that we currently use. And I'm just going to go to the next slide so that you can see them side by side. Currently, we have been using a gene therapy definition shown on the left that was adopted by the board a few years ago. This was even before Prop 14, in order to include this type of research to be funded. And currently we fund it without any need for there to be a stem cell or progenitor cell component. This is just straight up gene therapy. And so we define it as shown on the left. Now the DISC-0 genetic research definition that is in the DISC-0 concept is a bit broader. It's inclusive of what's under the gene therapy, but it extends it to allow for elements such as introducing any nucleic acid into a cell, like an mRNA or an antisense oligo into cells. And so I think the question for discussion, it's not, just to emphasize, this is not currently in the concept documents, is the question of whether that should be broadened to be like it is in DISC-0, or whether it should remain a little tighter as is shown on the left and how we've been using recently. So that concludes my presentation, and happy to address any questions there may be.
Let's do this, guys. I do have one general question for Gil, but then I think we should probably organize the discussion so that for each type of grant, we discuss briefly the proposed changes. I think if we try to discuss all of those proposed changes at once, we're going to get a little confused and it'll be hard to manage the discussion. So the general question to Gil is, we just had a long discussion with Rosa and Maria Milan about data sharing requirements and helpful language that'll be added to the guidance documents. Is that same approach going to be used for the CLINs, TRAN, and the other discs?
Yes. So our approach for all of this is to think about data sharing in a more holistic way as it applies to all of our programs. So not really reserved just for one. So absolutely, yes.
Yeah, and the helpful resources for applicants is the thing I'm
yes.
really focused on. Okay, great. Okay, discussion or questions about the concept plan changes for DISC 2, please. Anybody got anything they want to know or contribute? Going once, going twice. We're out of there. Tran? No, you guys have obviously done a great job drafting these changes. CLIN 1 changes, questions, comments? Nope. CLIN 2. Okay, then finally, Gil's question about the definition of gene therapy and genetic research. I did have one suggestion. I know in other places we've said as they apply to stem cells and regenerative medicine as a way of at least narrowing the scope a little bit. Is that something we could do here also, Gil?
Yes, and I think that's also been true of the gene therapy definition that we currently have. I think there was this strong feeling from the board that it should be regenerative in some way. So we have the same definition of regenerative medicine that we would apply to this.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, JT.
Yeah, so Gil, I think in the spirit of incorporating what's in Prop 14, that the expanding the scope beyond the original language that we've been using for gene therapy to incorporate the broader genetic idea makes eminent sense. So I think we need to give that very serious consideration.
Gil, could you put that language back up again?
Yeah, great idea.
Sure.
Good, please.
Yeah, give me a second.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, JT, you got your hand up again.
No, that's the same hand. I just think as the technology.
Whoops.
Yeah, I was muted. I'm sure Maria may have done that to me intentionally. As
Not this time.
as the technology marches inexorably along and more things are applicable to the regenerative medicine space, I think we need to keep pace of that. And I think this DISC zero language here is reflective of that those new technologies are becoming more and more applicable. So I would be in favor of enlarging it in scope to allow for this terminology.
Other thoughts, comments on this? I'll just add that I was at a seminar before this one that actually was using different ways of transforming cell fate, for example, from astrocytes to neurons, which could be a very powerful approach. And I think this would allow those sorts of approaches to be included, which is good in my mind.
Yeah.
Larry, would you like me to share the 2 slides we have regarding this topic?
Sure.
Okay. So my colleagues and I put our heads together and thought, what would be the rationale for expanding the scope of gene therapy for some funding opportunities for all our pillars? As JT just pointed out, Proposition 14 indicates the funding of genetic research, which again, you saw the definition. And just to remind everyone, especially in the last 2 years, there has been significant progress in the area of RNA science that applies to vaccines and therapeutics, including in regenerative medicine. And as again, there was a testimonial from Larry right now. So CIRM with a unique opportunity in the creation of new solutions to accelerate application of gene therapies for unmet medical need. And if you've been following the literature, especially in the last couple of years and the last even since October, there have been development of new technologies that will allow for novel and successful application of these modalities to areas where we really are desperately looking for solutions, such as RNA vaccine for neurodegenerative diseases. So if I'll show you on the next slide, that these approaches have been developed and applied for rare and unmet medical needs, including the ASOs, siRNA, and as you know, most recently with messenger RNA. And we've all had hopefully the vaccine and already appreciate the importance of mRNA in resolving some of our diseases. But what's so exciting is that the mRNA research has exploded to include multiple applications that are really important to us, such as the area of multiple sclerosis as an autoimmune disease, not as an infectious disease, but as an autoimmune disease. Bone regeneration, autoimmune diseases. Moderna is investing in an autoimmune disease by showing, at least in animal models, that CAR T cells are increased. Yes, CAR Ts as well as Tregs are developed in the presence of the specific mRNAs that they're using in autoimmune diseases. And most recently, Moderna and Penn State have shown also in preclinical studies that they can, through messenger RNA technology, resolve some cardiac disease, again, in animal models. All this is a testament to the fact that in order for CIRM to maintain its being on the forefront and accelerating science, I think it makes sense for us to be involved in that research and allow us to assist those grantees who are interested in this area and accelerating the work. And who knows, it may turn out to be many of the diseases we've been wanting solutions for may come out from this technology. And so for that, I think, at least I personally would like the board to consider this technology to be part of our armamentarium moving forward.
Great. Thank you, Abla. Any other discussion before? Well, I guess I have to announce Maria Bonneville just let me know that we seem to have lost quorum. So we're not going to be able to do anything final today, I gather, but we can get a sense of the committee. But then how do we bring this to a final approval before it goes to the board, Maria?
You would just mention that the sense of the committee was that they were in favor of it, although not all members were present. We did not have quorum. And then the final vote would take place at the board meeting.
Okay, great. So we can go to the board. Good. So any final comments or questions about the definition changes? Maria Milan.
If the subcommittee is in favor of expansion of the definition, would you like us to bring that for board consideration at the March 24th meeting?
I think that would be sensible. It's a significant change. It's a very positive change, I think, in terms of technology. I do think we're going to still want to keep a focus on stem cell and regenerative medicine approaches as much as possible. But yes, I think that should come to the board.
Yeah, I agree. This really expands the portfolio because with RNA therapeutics, there's a lot of new developments.
Okay. Other comments or questions? Okay, so Maria Bonneville, can we vote on these in a batch or do we have to go through one by one?
You can vote in a batch.
Great. So somebody want to move for approval?
I will move for approval. This is David in San Diego.
Second, Deborah.
Thank you.
I thought we couldn't because we don't have a quorum.
It's not a formal vote. It's just a sense of the committee.
So a consensus of the committee. Okay.
Yeah. Public comment at this point, correct?
Yes.
Is there any public comment?
Go ahead, Kevin. Go ahead.
Well, before we do, I just want to make sure that I from a personal perspective, I looked at this as two different situations. So you batch the concepts, and then there was a separate consideration of the expanded definition of genetic research. I just want to make clear on what the recommendations are. So when we position this for the board meeting, we can clearly articulate it. So I'm fine if we want to do it all together, just the approval of everything, or do you want to batch it up with the concept considerations and approvals and then the approval of the expanded definition?
Isn't the definition part of the concept change?
Yeah, I believe it is. Kevin, I think that's a good question. I personally would say we ought to just do them as one batch. I mean, as near as I can tell from the discussion, everybody is going to be in favor of everything that's been proposed. There's been insightful discussion and back and forth. I think we're in good shape to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Does anybody object to that approach? Great. Okay. Public comment, still none, right?
Not that I can find.
Good. Let's vote on a sense of the committee.
Okay, Haifa, Deborah Deese.
Yes.
Mark Fisher Colbury.
Yes.
Judy Gaskin.
Yes.
Larry Goldstein.
Yes.
David Higgins.
Yes.
Pat Levitt.
Yes.
Shlomo Melmed.
Yes.
Christine Muskowski.
Yes.
Jonathan Thomas.
Yes.
Art Torres.
Aye.
Keith Yamamoto.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, the sense of the committee has passed. Let's see. According to my agenda, the last thing is any additional public comment, it sounds like. Do we have anybody who wants to make a general or other comment? No. I think we've been very efficient, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Good job, Mr.
We'll
Chairman.
see you at the board meeting, March 24th.